So our next topic for the afternoon is space battle management. And our next speaker for this afternoon is Mr. Floyd Kerr, AKA Shock. He is a retired U.S. Air Force officer and prior enlisted airman. He spent the first decade of his career in Air Combat Command as an enlisted aircrew operator aboard the AWACS surveillance, warning, and C-2 aircraft. After earning a commission, he entered U.S. Space Command and served as an operator, instructor, engineer, and graduate of the U.S. Air Force Weapons School. Since his retirement in 2017, he has worked on teams for Space Flag, the National Space Defense Center, DARPA, Air Force Research Labs, and Space Delta II. He's the owner of K4 Active Defense and founder of Red Space. Welcome to Blue Marble Week, Mr. Kerr.
Okay, hey, thanks everybody. I'm sorry I missed the intro. I've had this meeting up all day, and I'm kind of working a few jobs, so I have like 3 comms going on. So not quite sure what was said. So I'll kind of I'll start off here. I think I need to share a screen.
Terrific. You're able to do that. You have that capability.
Also, give me just 1 second here. And I think I, like a few others, I like Zoom and these technologies, but when I go into presentation mode, things get all screwy with multiple screens. So I'm going to leave this slide up here.
That's exactly how I did it yesterday, because I had the same problem. So just be comfortable. We're cool. Thanks.
All right, thanks. So I'm not an astronaut, not a PhD. I'm not a pole mill expert. I'm not a math expert or an orbital analyst expert. So as we're checking off the things I'm not good at, I am good at being an operator. And based on my past, I kind of became a big picture guy. And I was blessed to have the kind of experiences through my career that have allowed me to, even now that I've retired, still maintain a network and have conversations with folks like you all that seem to be pretty interested in parts of space that I didn't even know was out there. So so far, the bits I've been able to hear about this has been it's been really cool. I'm honored to be able to be invited to talk here. I do want to thank Hippie out at the Space Force Association and Blue Marble Week and the Foundation for Future. Like I said, it's exciting to be part of these unique discussions. So what does K4 Active Defense bring to Blue Marble? Well, I bring what I believe is Red Space operations, and that's really kind of a threat-focused planning. And a lot of the discussions I've heard just recently from Luz and some of the previous speakers is this is not a topic that's new to even those that aren't familiar with military space operations. It is difficult not getting any feedback from anybody, not seeing faces. When Hippie tasked me to come do this, I didn't know, as a retired guy owning my own company, having like 10 jobs, I could be tasked by a retired colonel, but it still happens. So I didn't know what to expect. I thought it might be a back and forth discussion, Q&A. And as I learned about it, I put some slides together. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go kind of quick through them. So mainly, I guess, Mike or Hip or anybody else out there has a good idea that maybe I can get some questions back and to have a discussion about some topics with the time that we have left there. Just a real brief background on why you see a lot of red on all my slides. So I started off my career as AWACS. I did a bunch of command and control jobs there, surveillance technician, weapons and tactics. But I got to be a radar controller, which was, for those of you who don't know, I got to basically play like the bad guy and talk to the bad guy aircraft to go fight blue. And when you play the bad guy, you get to break all the rules because red doesn't really follow the rules within a box. Anyway, I had a lot of fun doing that. That's where I got my first little hook there. After I commissioned and went over to the officer side, started working in Space Command, then I got a chance to do some opposition force work for a deployed unit where we just did some exercises out in the woods with, I got to use my truck and again, play the bad guy driving down the road and pulling the e-brake slide in the dirt while this big semi truck stopped and these guys got out with their, fake guns and started shooting at us. And I mean, like some people say that some guys don't grow above the age of 12 or 15. And I'm probably one of those guys because that kind of stuff, even in my, older days is a lot of fun and exciting. So again, it's still sticking with me, this opposition force through my career. Then I get to do some space range and some weapons officer type assignments where my eyes really opened up to a lot of different ways of integrating capabilities. And I got to go do some OPFOR work up on the North Nellis ranges where they, put you out in the woods, and they have a guy there who's to make sure I don't get bit by a snake or fall down and really break my leg. But other than that, he just stands there and watches me. And I'm to play the role of a downed pilot or someone who's been, lost out in the woods and has to use a radio and get back in touch with civilization using space technologies and those things. So again, playing Survivor out there. Sorry, I kind of blended stories. So I got to play Survivor out there. While that wasn't OPFOR, it was still the same kind of flavor of being on the ground and being involved in that tactical kind of a fight. We did get to go out and be OPFOR where it was nighttime and they brought helicopters came in, and as an aircrew member and as a space operator, you didn't get a lot of military combat feeling like you see in the movies. But whenever we did these exercises, it was extremely intense and very exciting. Anyway, so that's why when I got toward my end of my career, I started thinking, what am I going to do when I get out? I didn't want to stand forever. What kind of things would I be interested in? And those were the things that stood in my head. And in addition to that, I also knew that when I was in Space Command, we didn't get a chance during our exercises to play and fight against an adversary that was realistic, because most of our adversary, anything was all classified. And while a lot of that is still true, there's a lot of basic fundamental things that are not classified anymore. So to be able to have a basic blocking and tackling maneuver warfare kind of a discussion is now possible in an environment like this, where I have to assume that one of these screens over here that says a name is probably some spy or some threat to the United States in some manner. And no offense to Blue Marble, I'm sure that's probably not the case, but I think you see my point why I'm getting at that. So I think that kind of covers up the background of why you'll see a lot of red in the slide and why I have chose this route. So when I got out, I didn't know it was going to be called Red Space. I started a company called K4 Active Defense, which is basically like a consulting company, and got to go do some work. I'd always had the red opposition force kind of passion, but it's hard to find a customer who's asking for that capability. Finally, I did get a chance, and DARPA reached out and found me for a program they were working called Hallmark, and they were working on indications and warning, course of action development, and space situational awareness tools that would all work together to provide the future of what we think will be needed for our infrastructure. In addition to that, they were also working on slimming down the acquisition timeline in a they called it a zero integrator approach, but it was just a new way of doing acquisitions in a very agile sense. So when they brought me in to work that program, it was kind of a home run for Red Space, because they asked me, hey, can you go do that Red Space campaign plan and create us a bad guy plan that we can have our tools fight against? And I said, well, with pleasure. That's kind of what I've always wanted to do. So we compromised on a 70-day exercise or a 70-day scenario, which my whole time in Space Command, I only got to do 3 days here, 4 days here, maybe a 2-week exercise, which was really like a 7-day exercise split over the weekend, but never anything that really accurately represented a space campaign conflict. And so it was difficult to do that, but the 70 days was built, and we were able to find the little niches where the crews would come in and get briefed on what has happened, what you're up against, what you're expected to do. Then it would work for, 10, 15 minutes, do a little problem, work on some briefings, maybe an hour or two worth of, console time. And they did that a few times to work through those 70 days of threat campaigning. So that brings me to, I guess, the rest of the presentation of what is Red Space now that I've kind of given you the background. I didn't want to give one of my past briefs or presentations because they all seem kind of unique to the audience. So over the last few days, I put this together. So it's kind of rudimentary. I think it'd be a great briefing for like a high school crowd. This is the type of style I think I shine to the most, just based on the simplicity of where I'm trying to go. So Blue Marble Week, what I'm showing here is what I think you think your AOR is. And so while this is a 2D PowerPoint slide, I hope you can see this moving. Yeah. This is just basically the first thing I heard Mike say was that his AOR, his box is from the surface of the moon or the surface of the Earth, which I'm trying to point at, to the surface of the moon. And I said, that's great. That's specific. I like specifics. But I would say now looking at this picture that we're all sharing, I would say that he was maybe a little off in that, sure, from the surface of the Earth, but I bet he wants to go beyond the surface of the moon because we've already talked about L2. So when it comes to, let's say, policy or workforce development, real world technologies, and we start talking about specifics, why red space is beneficial is because we use pictures to talk to. So I do know that we are speaking about the same exact thing. And that's just an example of why we've used these type of technologies. So I've made an acronym out of the red space. The first one obviously was red. And next we'll talk a little bit about education. I've mentioned briefly that I like to educate toward the folks I shine toward in that high school age with simplicity of language, even younger. I heard the Space Gala yesterday, and I had not heard of that yet. And I was really excited to hear that kind of education going on at those young ages. Because when I've talked to my friends about, hey, check out these satellites I made, they would be able to teach kids. And I don't know if you can see this picture here, but these are satellites we've used at Red Space to teach where you've got faces. Now, if I got a satellite talking to me, I'm interested in a different perspective, and maybe that's not for your PhD audience, but as we work toward getting our younger folks on there, these are things that Pixar hasn't really done a good job yet, getting out there. And then on the other side of the coin, we go into those same models we use for the children. Inside of those models, if you were to open them up, you would see, which is on the right, which is your more specific, detailed, advanced education type of a breakdown, but all in the same type of structure. I'll leave that for there. Doctrine. When we worked with the Hallmark program, we got a chance to experiment with some doctrine. What doctrine would Red use in the future? So there's a bunch of ways to do it, and I'm not here to tell anybody which is the right way. It's about the process of figuring out what that doctrine is going to be for your adversary. And again, I'd say adversary, and for a lot of the business folks out there, it may just be competitors. That's a world I'm still kind of transitioning into. These documents here, I just wanted to highlight them. These are open source, I guess. I'm not sure if that's the right word now, but they're out there every year. They're released. There's space threat assessments, and these are great places to go to get a glimpses to what the adversary is doing at the unclassified. Pretty much everybody knows about it level. Establishing new norms of communication for new business terrain. I think that bottom line there is, as we move forward on these policy and on international partnerships, there's a lot of different ways to say the same thing in space. So I hear in the government side, they work on brevity. I'm sure they're working on that in the commercial side as well, and in the civilian industry side. So that's an area where Red Space is trying to pave some ground as far as coming up with some common terms. Spectrum. The new cross-reality technologies are enabling the kind of education that I went through in my career to take place so much faster. When it comes to explaining how the spectrum works, all these things, these advanced technologies are ways for us to learn about space faster than we ever have before, in more interesting, with more colors than we've seen before. So getting our youth interested, these are all things that we focus on. Talk just a second about partners. When I was in the military, some of my best times out there were working with our international partners, but a lot of frustration came when I got into space because we were sharing a lot less because of those classification boundaries. And we've all heard, most of us probably heard our senior leaders say, hey, we're trying to push those down, and so are we. The sooner we can get those pushed down, the easier we'll be able to work across international lines the same way we do with our commercial partners now that we work with, where you have common terminology, common language, and the ability to move quickly. All that drives from having a common foundation and starting off the same way, which is what our red space concepts are designed to do, is bring us that. That brings us to the A in red space. We start off with red, and we're going to do it twice because it's just another way to say threat focused, right? So adversary. The basic blocking and tackling of space maneuver warfare is not something that we have had a chance to like chat around the water cooler about a whole bunch. That's one of the things that we want to do. And these kind of diagrams where we have 3D models where we can now share a picture and say, hey, what happens if I move this guy in here to closer a bit? Well, all of a sudden now that makes sense. And never in a world in space could I say, hey, what if I move that guy closer a bit? People would look at me like, get out of the room. But there's a way to make it simpler, and that's where we're trying to get. So now maybe not as simple as I may be, but definitely more simple than we are now. So cyberspace, another key component of red space. One of the things that I dealt with in my career in Space Command is that Space Command always seemed to think it was different than cyber, and they still do. And I just don't. I think that you don't have space without cyber. So how can you have two separate things? But there's folks out there that know more than I do. And that's not really worth arguing about, but I don't think I can do space without cyber. So when I see cyberspace, I think of, I got to be able to do artificial intelligence, machine learning, and visualizations, meaning there's so much stuff out there. Someone else has to sort through and sift the cream of the crop data to the top so I can see it. And that's the only way to do space. So we're inherently tied to cyber. So the E in red space is experimentation, research, development, those kind of trying new things, being outside the box. That's I think why we felt like we hit a home run with DARPA and getting to work with them, is because the kind of flexibility to try new things was there, and we really learned a lot. Felt like we learned a lot and got to show Space Force and Space Command. We got to show them a lot about the space threat. And I don't know for a fact, but they didn't have the names for the wings. I don't think they had those names in 2017, and they called the wings the deltas. And so I'm thinking that maybe they had our deltas, our red deltas had something to do with it, but we'll never know. That is all I have to transmit. I see a few minutes left here, probably for the time. So I did do a good job of eating up some air time here, but I'll leave this rest of the time up for questions.
You're getting thank you, Kerr. I really appreciate that. There's some really cool comments in the chat about, this sort of visualization is really necessary. We miss it a lot. And that this kind of stuff does translate to kids really well. So, I'm going to put in a plug for the Foundation for the Future, but they're working to do this kind of outreach to students, which is why we had the speakers we had yesterday. So terrific. That's good work. I want to make sure that you, if you're able to, stick around for Sean McLean, Major McLean's talk later. That big circle that encompasses the L points, I am a big fan of calling that the McLean line. He's got a really good argument. He will never say that. I'm embarrassing him just by bringing.
So I will double down on that. I've already been working with Sean and
great,
Joshua Carlson, and
small world.
I don't know if they think it's a secret. So maybe they'll file a lawsuit when they get on there, but we're working on a video game, and that cyberspace bullet you saw there.
Yeah.
On a video game with a company called Red Space Cyber, and they're going to hopefully put something together that's a demo that we can kind of go shop around, probably to organizations like yours and others, that says, hey, is this a game you think you would play on your phone? It's kind of like, I don't know, there's a few versions of it. we want to do a demo that just shows, hey, we can have a space game that's not blasters and lasers and all that. It's more focused on the context we're talking about. You know, it would have to do with moving materials and managing spectrum and stuff that most people would think that's boring. But if you're a space guy or a space gal, like, that's cool. That's fun stuff. So that's what we want to do. So I may not be able to make it around for their briefings. If you see me online, I'll try to jump in. I'll have my screen probably up and I'll check the chats. But I haven't worked with those guys. And as far as this right here, the inspiration for this model. So when I worked with DARPA, I had a model that looked very similar, but DARPA really only cared about I'll call it the near Earth, even though their near Earth is deep space when you're talking about geo.
Right.
And so when I started working with Sean, and after I read Josh's book, which I'm sure I'll tell you about, I realized, hey, this need for beyond geo and all the way to Mars, I'm not going to go all the way to Mars yet. That's just red space, right? But but Moon, clearly, that needs to be part of an understood AOR. And when I point to a place and say, where is it? I can't say geo, I can't say cislunar, I got to be more specific.
Right.
So now when I say, well, as long as you're within the McLean line, you're good. And the McLean line would basically be, if I drew one more of these,
yep,
you know, out here, and I can almost do it right now in front of you, but that would be like
exactly right. It's all 5 L's. Lieutenant Colonel Garretson, retired Colonel Garretson, has a kind of a specific definition, but these are necessary pieces of the conversation. You know, several of you officers have used the phrase AOR. For the civilians on the call, that's area of responsibility, right? Like, let that sink in for a second. We're talking about an area of responsibility that stretches from L2 on the far side of the moon. Could you point to that? Yeah, thanks, buddy. And then all the way out to L3 on the far side of the Earth. That is a big circle, oval. It's technically an oval. Yeah, that is a big AOR, area of responsibility. So that's kind of all the time that we have. I'd love to kind of dig into this deeper. If you're interested, please share your oh, hey, Pete Garretson just said, hey, thanks for the shout out. He's here. So thanks, buddy. We appreciate your insights to this. Yeah, so we're going to switch over. We really appreciate your time. I think you've got, I love the acronym, by the way, just as a personal basis, as a guy who, let's just say, was academically challenged by choice. I like having simple things like that. It makes complicated things. It takes work to make hard things, complicated things simple. So good for you for doing that. That's helpful to everybody.
Well, thank you
right,
again for having me on and giving me the time to speak here. I'll try to listen in, and if there's any questions for me in the discussion, hopefully I can help out there.
Right.
Sorry for being a little bit late.
No worries. No worries. Thanks for your slides. Ed, it's over to you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks again, Floyd. That was a pretty interesting topics you got there and some neat innovation you're working with.